Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of In the Heyday. I'm your host, Oliver Hayes, and today is finally the day. It is the first day of preseason for the Colorado Buffaloes men's basketball team, and I was, of course, there in attendance. And not only did they have practice today on Wednesday, but they have practice on Friday as well, and I'll be there in the rest of the practice for the rest of the season, of course. But yeah, at this first one, I didn't learn too much. Not too much development since I last saw them at the end of July. So only 2 months since I last saw them play. Of course, we saw them play Australia on ESPN this summer. The two main guys I was looking for, though, were Bangat Dak, who was fully healthy and practicing with the team. He talked a little bit about his injury, which I'll talk about later. But he said that he had a slightly or how do you say it? Had a slight tear, slight medial meniscus tear. That's what he said. A slight medial meniscus tear. He said he suffered it during pickup basketball back home. But yeah, he was fully healthy, like I said, and he provided some answers. I'll be writing a feature story on him. That'll probably be dropping tomorrow, if I had to guess. But either way, I talked to him. That was a guy who I decided to talk to. But the other guy who I hadn't seen play in person, who we've been trying to find out more about, is big man Alon Mikaeli from Israel. I didn't talk to him personally. I know I'm pretty sure a few other journalists did. So you can probably see some other stuff from some other outlets, including Scubuffs Sports or Daily Camera. The usuals. But either way, I saw him play, and he impressed me. I'll start with him before I get into Bangat Dak, because we all know Bangat and what he can do. But Alone, he was just super polished, and he even though he's 19, I think he turns 20 at the end of November. So he'll be an older freshman. For only being a freshman, even though he is older, he definitely looks like it. Dude is a grown man. Yeah, that was the first impression of him, is that he's there. He can move well. He's smooth. He can body up guys on the glass, offensively, defensively. He can do a lot of things, and it was very fun watching him and Bangat Dak actually match up against each other a little bit. Just because I got to see Mikaeli try and be versatile against Dak, who offers a very unique type of defender on the defensive end. And so Mikaeli had to put up a tough 3-on-1 possession that he made in Dak's face. There was another one where he tried to pump fake around Dak and got a shot block that may have been a goaltend, maybe not. And so it was fun to just see Mikaeli, who's only 6'9", try and work his way against 6'11" Dak, who of course can jump out of the gym. And then on the defensive end, since the first day, there's still a bunch of teaching and things like that. Tad talked about how they were going over a lot of things that they just briefly went over the summer. Like, I don't know, at the end of the practice today, they went over free throw rebounding for however long. So it was a lot of teaching and things like that. But from what I saw defensively, Mikaeli seemed pretty fit to make an impact on the offensive end and on the glass. He did so in Israel in the pro leagues, but also for Israel at the international levels. So basically everything that I saw in the scouting report, it's true. I feel like after at least after one day, we'll have to see what I think 5 practices from now, after all preseason, after our first game, after of watching him, after non-conference, all these things. We're gonna have to see the type of player he is. But I think, as far as what we know about Mikaeli, that's what CU is getting, and I think he'll make an impact right away. So I think fans should be excited about him. I haven't talked to him yet, like I said, but keep your eyes peeled for some content from some other outlets, and of course I'll try to talk to him soon, probably either Friday or probably in the next week, if I had to guess. But go more into Bangat. He just talked about, the big thing was just talking about his injury and disclosing what it was, and how he suffered it, with the slight medial meniscus tear. And like I said, he suffered. Like I said, he said he suffered in a pickup game while we're back home. But as we could see from the outside, it looked like a pretty good recovery, a pretty easy recovery for knee surgery. And from what Bangat said, of course it was tough, but he seemed to get through it with good spirits and things like that. And having people like Evan Batty, who didn't play basketball for 3 years from high school, between high school and college, and Danny Manning, who dealt with a ton of injuries at through his NBA career. He talked about those guys and how they helped him through that process, but also just how he had to learn and just think a lot about the process of basketball and how to get better, not being able to be on the court because Ben got surprisingly for how skinny he is and being the unicorn type player he is, for how injury prone those guys are. He said that besides, maybe a few days here and there, he hasn't really had a stretch in his life where he's been injured. So this was all new to him, but for the most part, he seemed to be in good spirits. And yeah, from what I saw from him today, he was just seemed more comfortable. Simply, I didn't see. Like I said, there was a lot of coaching, so it was a little bit harder to get a gauge of guys. But defensively, he seemed pretty mobile. Like I said, swatted a Mikaeli shot. And last year, it seemed like Bangot was getting beat off the drill by or at a triple threat by anybody. And it took him a second for him to kind of be able to, as Ruben Sams talked about in the podcast, beat the ball up from the backside whenever he gets beat, whether it's getting a back tip or swatting a shot more likely. And I felt like that took a while for Dak to kind of get in rhythm. It wasn't until conference play that we started to see a little bit of that last year. But this year it's already there. So I thought that was one thing that stood out. He seemed to be moving well with Mikaeli. I think that will be a fun battle in practice, seeing Dak match up with Malone and Taco and Sebi. Those are all that's a versatile group of guys. And I feel like they mimic exactly what he'll see across the Big 12. So I'm very excited to see what Bangot can do on the defensive end, more so than even what he can do on the offensive end. But my big wonder about him is whether or not he's going to play the 4 or the 5. So I asked him about it, and here was his answer.
I think I can end up where I end up. Physically wise, I want to play the 4, but I feel like just with my skill set and my size, you could throw me anywhere on the court because I don't think any position, any body type can stand in front of me or have the skill set that I have. So I really think every position is a mismatch out for me out there.
So yeah, pretty basic answer. Obviously, any player is going to be available to play anywhere, at least be willing to. But like Bangot said, he is said physically he thinks that he should play the 4, and that's something that when I've brought up that question across this podcast so far, that I've said that I think he should play the 4 and is more equipped to do so. One of those reasons is due to the depth that CU has not had for the first 2 years of Bangot Dak. Having Eddie Lampkin and just Elijah Malone, Bangot was forced to play the 5 in the rotation. It just simply kind of came down to that. There were not too many lineups where he could play the 4 unless there's that double big lineup of him and Elijah last year, or him and Eddie. But those lineups weren't too productive. And a lot of times it wasn't because Bangot was struggling offensively. His game offensively is more reminiscent of a guard than it is a center. I mean, he catches alley-oop, sure, and throws a few baby hooks that go in, but he can dribble the ball. He has shift. He can shoot the ball. When he's playing pickup, I think it looks a lot more like him. It looks a lot more like a guard than a center. And so because of that, I think he can stretch out and play the floor, and that will make the Buffs offense a lot more dangerous if he can do that, and will offer a lot more rotations to be played. The big thing, though, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, is just the defensive issues and whether or not he can make the jump to be able to stay in front of smaller guys. And if he does get beat, if he can continuously recover by swatting shots or at least contesting. Just because, yeah, I mean, it is harder for him to guard smaller players. But on the flip side of that, it's harder for him to guard huge guys that are much stronger than him. But I do think it is slightly easier for him to do that in a weird way, just because he can at least, he weirdly, when guys are posting him up, it appears that he tries to not allow them to feel his body, and allows them to kind of go up so that Bangot can more so time when they go up and swat the shot. Where a lot of times guys are trying to feel out the offensive player and, trying to shift him one way or the other and stay in front of him. And of course, Bangot's trying to do that, but it looks a lot different. And so I think Bangot has an easier time against those bigger centers than he does the smaller power forwards. And of course, he can, even if he is struggling against a big center, he can still probe a little bit. So you can send double teams down to the post and help him out. and he can just be more of a help guy. And they can switch the zone and things like that. And of course, they can still do that when he's the 4, but it's hard to have a probe guy if you're going to have, Elijah or Taco or Leonardo or even Alone or Sebi at the 5. It's, those guys can all, besides Alone and Sebi, Elijah, Leo, and Taco are all going to be probing guys who are going to be looking to swat shots and protect the rim, and have two guys on the floor like that at the same time is really tough to do and hard to play with on offensive end, and kind of creates that mismatch nightmare on the other, on both sides of the floor. You can have Bangot stretching the floor and uh, being tall and getting rebounds on the offensive side of the floor, and being a nightmare, a mismatch nightmare on that side, but then get beat off the dribble consistently, um, and things like that on the other side. So it will be, at least in my opinion, about whether or not he can make that jump. And I think the big thing is just the the fact that he has the approach to the game that he needs. Tad talked about, how tough it is that Bangot didn't get an off season, or at least where an off season where he could play much with his injury. But he talked about how smart Bangot is, and and BD followed up by talking about how much film he watched and the things that he learned and stuff like that. And so at least I'm confident with what I saw today and then of last season, the jumps he made on the offensive side, that it will be more likely that he could shift down and play the 4. But looking at the rest of the team, and just taking into account more of what Coach Boyle said in general to the scrum, you can catch that. You can catch the full scrum on my YouTube, Oliver Hayes. But um, for for the whole team, like I said, there was a lot of coaching going on, so it was hard to kind of get a gauge. But yeah, I mean the effort's there. A lot of loose balls were dived on, bodies hitting the floor, things like that, tough foul, like hard fouls, physical play. So that's one thing you can 100% expect from these guys. I haven't had a practice that I've shown up to where I've been like, huh, they're really, just taking it easy, like whatever. These guys get after it, and I think that that really is the biggest thing um, that has stood out to me so far. But these guys can shoot it still. That hasn't really changed. One thing that I was a little surprised about today was just the amount of turnovers. There were a lot of turnovers, which I was surprised about. And obviously not a good sign. Nothing that anybody who's been following the Colorado basketball team wants to hear after the issues that this team has had the last few years. I know people have talked about the issues that the Bucks have had taking care of the ball under uh, Tad Boyle's tenure, but I'm about to turn 22 next month, so I and I've been more of an NBA fan my whole life. So it was only in the past few years that I started watching Colorado basketball, and when they had McKinley and Deshaun Schwartz and Batty, things like guys like that. But even still, I mean, my first game that I went to, I was like, yeah, they turned that rock over. So I was a little disheartened, of course, to see them turn the ball over today. But at least it more so came in situations like full court pressing and stuff like that, rather than the half court. Um, so it was kind of situations where they're being forced to have to situations where the defense is forcing a turnover or giving up an open shot, essentially. And while there are more turnovers than I would have liked, when you're running that over and over and over and over again, um, of course, it's going to seem like there's a lot more turnovers, even if there were uh, a lot more turnovers than average, I guess. So I don't know. I'm talking about turnovers a lot. Beyond that, trying to think what else. The leadership is probably going to fall back onto the it's going to fall back onto the returning guys. A lot of it, of course, with just how young this team is. Um, but but yeah, Sebi, Bangot, Andrew Crawford, Felix, Elijah Malone, of course. Um, those are the guys who are trying to take leadership and teach guys things. I was picking up on Elijah, talking to Leo a little bit, and trying to show him about during the free throw rebounding, how to fix his technique and things like that. And so I think those guys are trying to take down a little bit, but of course that's something that we'll have to see a little bit more as the preseason progresses. But yeah, beyond that, not too much more to take away from practice. But one question I asked Coach Boyle was, was just about, who stood out on the defensive end, either as help defenders or on ball. And he had an interesting answer, not just as in terms of the names that he dropped. So here, take a listen.
I'm not sure. To help defenders, we got a lot of work to do, but I think we got a lot of guys that can guard the ball. I think Barrington's a good defender. He gets his hands on a lot of balls, deflections. Sebastian Rancic on the ball. He's 6'10". He's got good feet. He really is a good on the ball defender. Really working with him when he's away from the ball. Jalen Holland, I thought, showed the ability to guard. Felix Casares, I think, those big wings that have the physicality to really defend. I think those two guys stood out to me, certainly this off season and in Australia. But everybody, if you don't guard, you're not going to play. So they're starting to figure that out, I think. I don't know if the young ones are or not yet, but that's probably a question for them. Not for me.
So the help defense is a little scary. Not personally from what I saw, but just from what Tad said, and he's the coach, so if he's not thinking it's up to par, then not the greatest thing in the world. But it is the first day. This team is super young, and I feel like out of all the skills that are going to kind of take a second for guys to pick up, help defense is probably going to be one of them, because the collegiate game is, of course, different than the high school game. And these guys are used to guarding the other team's best players and things like that. And when everyone on the floor is able to have this crazy first step, and they're all athletic and they all can shoot, it is hard to understand where you should be on the floor to be able to help contest a shot, but also be able to help pick up a driver at the same time and contest a layup as well. And at the same time, you're also trying to learn the new defenses as well. So just a lot to take in for these newer guys. Personally, I wasn't taking too much note of the help defense, but I was interested to see if any names were dropped. Unfortunately, not. But I guess the optimistic part for the help defense is that hopefully it's not needed, because Tad dropped a few names on ball: Barrington Hargress, Sebastian Rancic, Jalen Holland, Felix Caceres, of course. And those were the four names that right? Yeah, that's four. Four names that he dropped. And I was honestly surprised a little bit by Barrington and Sebi. Not because I didn't have faith in those two, but just because Barrington is obviously small at 6 foot, but he moves his feet well. He's stocky and pretty solidly built. So I understand that, and I've advocated for his defense so far through podcasts and just I've talked optimistically about it. But yeah, I still kind of had these question marks, and I think it will be interesting to see how he matches up versus more skilled guards. At the moment, he is the most talented guard on the Buffs roster besides Isaiah Johnson. And so, but obviously Isaiah Johnson is young and still on the smaller side. So, I mean, hopefully Isaiah Johnson does, with that huge scoring burst he had versus the Australia Boomers, if he does replicate that and it has a crazy freshman year, of course, that will speak to Barrington's defense, help prepare him and things like that. But, given it's more likely that IJ has a chill freshman season, has some ups and downs and things like that, isn't going to be one of the premier guards across the Big 12. And so that's where I'm more interested to see if Barrington can stand out and still have that same success, because these young guys, even Josiah Sanders and Jalen Holland, who were 4-stars, and some of the returners like Crawford and Felix, they're still not necessarily like one-dimensional, but they kind of have just like a few aspects of their game. Like Felix, he's not really offensively minded. He's either going to hit a catch and shoot three or make a quick drive, but he's looking to kind of screen and pass a lot of time offensively. If Holland catches it, he's going to drop. He's kind of similar. He's a little bit more offensive minded, but kind of the same thing. Josiah, he's so physically gifted that a lot of times he's just trying to go downhill, and for him it's trying to figure out how to be more nuanced in his approach to trying to score the basketball. And so with Barrington being the second oldest guy on the team, because I think he is older than Bangot, even though they're both juniors. Well, yeah, he is, because he's a redshirt junior. There we go. But being now entering his fourth year of college basketball, at least being in a collegiate program, he knows where to cut guys off. He knows where he's been seeing these type of guards for a minute now. And I'll be interested to see how if he makes that stride and if he can translate his practice defense to the games. But Sebastian Rancic, even though he has the tools, I've always just kind of wondered about his effort. And so I guess that's why Tad didn't, mention him or anybody else for the help defense guys. But I'm glad to hear that his on-ball defense has been solid because I thought it was pretty solid against Australia. But just like I said, it's not. I don't know. I hate to say it's not. It's the effort. Of course, when Sebi has to deal it looks like he's going to be the first option for the Buffs this year, and he is playing a bunch of minutes. He played a bunch of minutes against Australia, and for the most part, he was guarding. Oh my God, I know it's either I think it was Sean McVay and the other guys were named Jack. I don't know. There were Sean's and Wills and Jacks all across that Australia team, but he was guarding McVay, the former NBA guy who played for the Rockets and stuff like that. Who had a great game, but he was also a negative plus minus, even though the Boomers won, and part of that was because Sebi was giving him hell on both offense and defense, and made it hard for him, and so I think personally I didn't give Sebi enough credit, and so I'm glad that Tad has mentioned him, at least for his on-ball defense and things like that, and then Jalen Allen, that makes sense for me. I've always talked about his defense, and I think it's more his offense is probably more underrated. Felix Casares, I mean I made that whole video about how he flipped the West Virginia game on its head in the Big 12 championship tournament last year when the Buffs upset the Mountaineers in Kansas City, where he basically took Javon Small out of the game by running him around like hell on offense and then just played him fantastically on defense. And of course, he had some help with that from RJ Smith and a few other guys, but for a freshman who didn't play much, for him to make an impact like that was very impressive to me, and something that I've been looking out for and taking note of this summer. And so another good guy to hear mention from Tad as far as on-ball defense. But besides that, I've been talking for a minute, and there's only more to learn from Friday practice that's going to be coming up and the practices in the weeks leading up to the season. The season tips off November 3rd against Montana State at home. The Buffs have October 19th exhibition versus Grace College. I'd assume somewhere before then they're going to have some black and gold scrimmage that they usually do, but I don't think that's been announced. So yeah, a lot of things coming down the helm, a lot of content's becoming, like I've said. And yeah, I didn't mention it yet, but the whole entire 2025-2026 schedule is released for the Buffaloes, but also for all Big 12 teams and programs. So I've talked about expanding more across the Big 12. I'll do that. I'll have to figure out a way to talk about some like maybe the bigger games across the conference that I'll just kind of watch in general. That'll be excited to look out for. But next podcast, I'll talk about what I hear on Friday. But I want to look at the games and make a way too early kind of prediction. Stab at which ones are winnable for the Buffs and make kind of a season prediction and go from there. And I'd love to hear some of your guys' thoughts on it. Either under this podcast, next podcast. I'd always love to hear your guys' thoughts. Questions, your guys' takes, whatever it is. I'd love to hear it. But like I said, I've been talking for a minute, so I should probably sign off and get to finishing the rest of my articles, the rest of my TikToks, Reels, things like that. So I appreciate you guys listening. My name is Oliver Hayes, and as always, you didn't hear it here first. That's Scope of Sports. But I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.